Alright, welcome back, Today it's still December 5th. It's been about a half an hour since the last cut. So the last video, not this video, but the previous video. I'm guessing that you've watched it and you're ready to watch this video because of how I concluded it. I told you I was going to be talking about something different. And I'm going to be trying to share a video that is not something that I have traditionally ever done. So it's going to be a new experience for you as much as it's going to be a new experience for me. Meaning, I got my dry erase board. Okay, I got my dry erase board right here, and I have some dry erase markers. Okay, so this video that you're about to watch, if you were to call it a title, I'm just picking this out of the hat. It's gonna essentially like, what is life, right? What is life? If you ask yourself, let's just, you can pause the video if you need time, or if you've already contemplated this, but what is life? What is this place? What is this earth? What is everything that we perceive? What is it? Have you ever wondered where it all came from? Like everything that you see, everything that you perceive, everything that you don't even know about, but it's out there. Everything that is that you're completely ignorant of. I'm not saying that in a negative context. I'm just meaning that things that you've never been exposed to, things that you've never had shared with you, therefore you're ignorant of certain things that are happening around you at all times, okay? So what is life? And then also, what is death? And then the bigger question is, what's beyond after death? Like what exists after death? Okay, so that's the big mystery, right? And that's why we have religion. Whatever religion, you can pick any religion out of the hat. They've all come into existence at some point to try and explain to people what is life, what is death, and what's after death. That's essentially what religion is at the very foundation. And meaning that out of the history of humanity, just think about all the different religions, all the different religious books and texts and scripts and scrolls, everything through recorded history. A lot of it has been to try and explain what this world is, what death is, and what's after death. And so over all these hundreds, thousands of years, you have books that are this thick, or books that are this thick, libraries full of books that try explaining the big question, right? So, whatever your current belief system is, whatever religion you identify with, from this video, I'm not saying it's irrelevant, meaning it's not important. I'm saying this video, I'm going to be sharing information with you from a very neutral perspective. Meaning, whatever religion you identify with, whether you believe in God, Heavenly Father, Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit, or you don't, or you believe in Krishna, or you believe in Buddha, or you believe in the pagan gods, or you believe in the devil and Satan, whatever, or you don't believe in any God. Maybe you're an atheist or agnostic. Whatever position you identify with, understand that I'm not going to be preaching to you. This video has nothing to do with preaching. I'm going to be sharing something with you that whatever position you're in, whatever you perceive as true or not true, by the end of this video, excuse me, I'm about to burp. By the end of this video, you might have a much larger grasp of what's actually going on. I'm not trying to sway you to anything, For me, just so you know, just off the get-go, I do believe in Heavenly Father, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Spirit. Okay, that's just for me. Whatever your belief is, it's up to you. I'm not trying to convince you of one thing or another. I'm simply going to be sharing things with you that I have learned through psychedelics. A big part of it has been through psychedelics. DMT and magic mushrooms specifically, those two, over a period of almost 7 years, okay? So I'm going to be talking about things where I have acquired knowledge, insight, wisdom, enlightenment about certain things that are happening beyond the human spectrum, meaning beyond what our human eyes can see, hear, perceive. Like there's a lot of different layers to this reality, and I have tapped into a lot of different layers, and I have experienced, seen what's there. And by saying that, I am not claiming to have all the answers. I don't know everything. Okay? So, what I'm going to share with you is what I have learned. And by saying that is the places that I have been and the things that I have learned enough, not everything, but enough to be able to step on the camera and confidently articulate what I have learned to give you, the viewer, a general understanding of who you are. I'm not exactly saying who you are. I'm like not your real specific identity, because I don't know you, and there's no way I can tell any of you exactly who you are, but I can give you a general idea of where you came from before you were born into this world. Meaning, if you for a person, you recognize that you have a spirit, you are a spirit, you recognize your soul, your inner being, the inner energy within you that makes you makes you unique to every other person out there. You have your own unique identity. There's no other you out there. You're you. Just like I'm me. There's nobody who can be me, even if they want to try. They can't. Okay? I am me, you are you, he is he, she is she, right? Pretty simple, straightforward, right? So if you recognize your soul and your spirit, you understand you have an energy within you that drives your body, your physical body. You can call it an avatar, a vehicle, something that is transporting your soul in this world, this reality that you're experiencing, where you perceive you're here on earth. I'm not going to go into that right now, but I'm just saying that's the inner you, the real you, not your physical construct, whatever you want to call it. I'm just to make it simple and easy throughout this entire video. I'm going to refer to your vehicle as your avatar. Okay, it's an avatar. Okay, and as we get through the video, this might make more sense to you. Okay, right now it might not. Just depends on what your own awareness is, what you've learned and what you haven't learned, and what type of religion and stuff you've been exposed to, or lack thereof, or whatever. Okay? So as I get into this, understand I'm not, if you say you're Christian, you follow Jesus Christ, good, and whatever knowledge that you possess in the context of the Bible, you've read the Bible, you can recite passages within the Bible. Okay, good for you. But understand where I'm coming from. I'm going to be speaking to this other larger crowd to maybe help them make sense of what we're dealing with as far as what this life is, what death is, and what is beyond. I'm trying to help everybody, even believers in Jesus Christ and all that. I'm trying to help you guys, because right now we're undergoing some severe spiritual warfare across the entire earth, and a lot of people are being lied to and manipulated. And even though they might perceive that they have the answers, or perceive that that they have things figured out, they might not. And so this entire intention of this video, again, I'm speaking from a neutral point of view. So whatever you know, cool, that helps you. But also at the same time, there might be things that you think you know, but by the end of the video, you might realize that things that you believe might not be true, or it might be a lie. And whatever I shared with you, something resonates with you, and you're able to adjust your perspective and how you're operating in this life, because whatever I said makes a lot more sense. Therefore, and then at some point you start applying this knowledge that I share, and things start happening for you in a better way. Then you'll really know that you're on the right track, right? But my goal is to help you, whoever you are, to break your mind free. I want to break your mind free so you can think for yourself. So you're not relying on all this external stimulus to tell you what to think, how to think, when to think, what you're allowed to think about and what you're not allowed to think about, trying to manipulate you in all these different ways. Okay, so just remember, everything I'm sharing, I'm trying to empower you. If some of the things I share with you might mess with your head, it might make you confused, but a lot of that confusion and, where you're kind of just pulling back, not sure, a lot of that is called cognitive dissonance, where whatever you currently perceive and then what I'm presenting to you, it's conflicting with each other. Whatever I'm sharing with you is conflicting or contradicting what you currently believe, and what you currently believe is whatever emotional attachments you have to it. It's making you feel uncomfortable in different ways, whether it's making you nervous, angry, upset, sad. It's affecting your emotions in a negative way, where at some point, rather than listening to what I'm sharing with you, your emotions and your inner monologue, your inner thoughts, the noise becomes so loud that you can't even hear what I'm saying. And then rather than learning or opening your mind, and it requires your own effort. You have to think critically, and you have to take both sides and be able to analyze both sides and try and figure out what is the most accurate answer. And so a lot of that discomfort is called cognitive dissonance, where it's things that just think about through your entire lifetime, how many lies you've been told, whether it's through your education system or your family or your friends or politics or TV shows, movies, all of it combined. Your mind, you've been programmed in different ways to perceive this reality to be something that it's not. And I'm trying to help you pull yourself back from the illusions of this reality and to see the world for what it really is. But the thing is, the world that the real world of, when you really get into it, it's a scary thing. It can be a scary thing. It doesn't have to be if you have somebody explaining the full picture to you. There are people out there who do know what this is, and they are entirely focused on nothing but gloom and doom all the time, and that's it. And so anybody who does try figuring out what's going on out there, wherever they're, if you think about this metaphorical path, you're walking down this path trying to find the truth. Well, at some point you find, for example, YouTube channels or Instagram pages or things on the internet where you perceive this person that's talking to you, or they have an audience and they're writing blogs or making videos, so they're speaking to a general audience. And at first glance, they appear to be somebody that knows what they're talking about. But the longer you're there and you listen to them, at some point you find out they only stay on one type of topic, and that's it. And a lot of it's a lot of gloom and doom and nothing but negative stuff. And they're not showing you any of the good out there, the good stuff that makes life even worth living, right? So what I'm trying to do in the next, if this takes a couple hours, so be it. And it's just a matter if I have your attention, and at some point when I start going into this, time might slip away with you, and you might watch the entire thing without even taking a break, okay? But understand my intentions as I'm doing this and I'm drawing on the board and stuff. I am trying to break these metaphorical chains, these illusions, these lies, and these deceptions that have attached themselves to your life over the course of your life. However old you are, whatever you've been exposed to, whatever you perceive this world to be, by the end of the video, a lot of those things that you perceive the world to be might not be that all might just melt away, and you have an entirely different perspective of not only what this world is, but who you are and how to get out of this place. And by saying that, you're like, what do you mean this place? What do you mean get out? Well, that's what I'm going to try sharing this all with you. And so just understand, I'm just picking a label out of the hat, one religion out of the hat. So say if you're a Christian, whatever branch of Christianity, it doesn't matter. And, say you have a lot of knowledge in the Bible. Okay, understand, I'm not going to be reciting anything from the Bible. And a lot of things that I share might resonate with you as if I am quoting things from the Bible, but I'm not. This is just stuff that will resonate with you. But there also might be things that might conflict with you depending on what your depth of commitment is towards church. Not your relationship and connection with Heavenly Father, but with church and what you're being told and taught by whatever pastor that you have. Not all pastors are good. Just like I've been saying with law enforcement, military, corporations, everywhere across the board, there are bad apples everywhere, and there are a lot of churches, especially in the schools of religion, that have been infiltrated by wolves in sheep's clothing that would be considered bad apples. And those bad apples are twisting the word of God. They're manipulating their followers to make them perceive things that are not true. And they're doing it all for their own interests, right? And I hope this all makes sense. Okay. So with that said, I can keep elaborating, explaining. So rather than just keep talking, I'm going to cut the camera here in a moment. But moving forward, I'm going to be raising my camera tripod up, and I'm going to be giving you an over-the-shoulder view. I'm going to be sitting on the floor of my van, where I can, where I can be drawing like this, and you'll be looking at me over the shoulder like that. So the remainder of this video is probably going to be like that, and you'll just be listening to me speaking as I'm drawing. And then at different times, I'll cut the camera, and I gotta wipe off the board, and I got a blank canvas again, and I'll start, and then we'll just continue from where I left off. And I'll do my best to, I'm probably gonna be using stick figures and stuff. I'm not gonna be I'm not gonna be getting super detailed, trying to make any fancy drawings. I'm gonna try and keep it very simple. My goal is to try and explain this as if you're a child, not in a condescending way, but in a way that, say a child or a teenager does find my videos, if they end up watching it for whatever reasons, even though the video might be too advanced for them, I'm at least speaking in a way that rather than, if they watch it, rather than walking away from the video all traumatized from what they heard, I'm trying to explain in a calm and clear way that even if they are young, they might grasp everything I'm talking about. So whatever your age is, I'm not speaking to you as if you don't know anything or as if you're stupid. I'm just going to be speaking from a neutral point of view and explaining the big picture. And again, what is life, what is death, and what is beyond death. This is going to take a while. I don't know how long it's going to take as I'm saying this right now. I'll know once I'm done, but I'm saying this, I might end up speaking 2 hours. It might, more or less. But so I am prepared for that, and I'm prepared to just start getting into it. So I'm going to cut now, and then I'm going to fix the camera, and then we're going to get into it, okay? And remember, it's just a matter if you acknowledge your soul, and you acknowledge you have your spirit, the inner you within you. In order for this video to make sense, first and foremost, you need to acknowledge that you are a spirit where when you die, your spirit goes somewhere. Where is it? I will try and explain a general idea of where you go, okay? I'm not saying it's the absolute. I'm not going to give you all the answers because I can't, but I'm going to try and help you understand what is beyond Earth and what's waiting for everybody the day you die, okay? So here we go. Okie day, here we go, you guys. Remember, don't make fun of my drawings. I'm not going to be trying to make anything very artistic. It's going to be about, you got to use your imagination, and you really got to listen, okay? You really got to listen. I'm sorry you can't see my mouth, and then draw at the same time, okay? It's just unfortunate with the setup. I can only be inside my travel van while I'm doing this, because anywhere else, all I'm going to be doing is attracting a lot of attention, and anybody that's lingering around to listen to what I'm saying, they will entirely disrupt my train of thought. So I have to do this from inside my vehicle because I have no other place to go to do it, okay? So just put aside all the fact that I'm in my van, just bear with me, okay? Bear with me. It's going to be all right. And so if there's anything that you might wonder, it's like, well, where do I even begin? Where do I even begin? Well, you got to kind of start at the very beginning if you want to make sense of this, which means before you ever came around, before this earth ever existed, this reality that you're experiencing now, before it ever existed, you got to go all the way back to the beginning. I mean, we're not going to go too deep, but we're going to start with God, okay? And right now, again, right now, I'm not trying to convince you. You can believe whatever you want as far as your perception of God and existence of God or not. Okay, that doesn't matter. I'm going to be painting a picture for you as if not only is God real, but I'm going to be explaining why everything is so messed up and chaotic today in 2024 going into 2025, okay? But you have to backtrack a long ways if you want to make sense of it all. And perhaps by the time I'm done explaining this, you might things might make a lot more sense to you, okay? So we're going to start with God, okay? We're just going to keep it simple. Just going to say God. Me personally, I say like Heavenly Father, okay? It's a huge difference, Heavenly Father. But for the sake of space on this board, everybody knows who God is or has heard the word. And the fact I'm using uppercase G as opposed to a lowercase g, that's a differentiation too, okay? So you got to make sure, just in general, if anybody's telling you they believe in God, well, you need to ask them, well, are you talking about uppercase G, Heavenly Father, or are you talking about the God of this material world? Because they are two different entities. And I will be explaining that as we proceed forward, but right now we're going to start with God, okay? And I'm just saying God because I'm not going to be using any formal names or trying to remember what proper names to use as far as when you go further back in time you had different names for Heavenly Father and Jesus Christ and all these other names and entities. They all had different names, but they've all been modernized and changed in different ways. But people recognize the name God, so that's what I'm just going to be using with an uppercase G. Okay? Heavenly Father. Okay? So a long, long time ago, before anything ever existed, God, okay? Where did God come from? But again, where did God come from? That's a very deep question, and that's something that we're not even going to touch, okay? Because that's going way, even. That's where you start getting into speculation, and only God can tell you where He came from. Okay, so that's not the point. But the point is, God exists, and a long time ago, nothing else existed. At some point, God became conscious of himself, where He's aware of Himself, He's aware of His own thoughts, and He's not also aware that He can create anything. Anything is possible. In God's imagination, He can create anything on a whim. Just think it up, and it's there if He wants it to be. He can make stuff, and He can take stuff away on a whim. Okay, so God exists, and at some point He creates a giant reality, a place where, if God doesn't want to just be energy, if He doesn't want to just be this a conscious energy, and He wants to materialize Himself into something that you would consider physical or some type of being, that something all consolidated into one being. So I'm going to use a stick figure, okay? This individual we're going to say is God, okay, right here. So God creates this reality, and so God can, He can interact with it in any different ways, and He can create things. He can create buildings. He can create a house if He wants to create a house, right? He can create, He can create the sun if He wanted to, right? Whatever He wants, and the moon, okay, whatever. At some point, God decides to make other entities. We're just sticking with stick figures. No pun intended. We're just going to keep it with stick figures. They can be anything. They don't even have to be stick figures. They can be animals, birds, anything. But it's an entity. It's a spirit. I'm not talking about this reality that we have here. I'm talking about another world, another reality, another dimension that is not here on Earth. It's somewhere else. You got to keep that in mind. This right here that I'm painting, yes, it's very similar to this world, and I'm going to tell you, this is all going to make sense as we proceed forward. So remember, be patient. But the original reality that God created, you got trees, and all a whole thing. So it's a pine tree, and you got flowers and grass and stuff. All kinds of things. He's just making it. It's a place that He can interact. But you also probably have a bunch of magic and cool stuff, right? in hindsight, at the beginning, everything was perfect. It was all perfect, right? Because at some point, these guys, you know, these individuals who he created, he gave them intelligence. They could think for themselves. They had their own unique identities. They had free will to make their own choices, and they all knew who God was. There's one individual amongst everybody else that can do things that everybody else can't do, and they all recognize him. Okay, and he's intermingling with, he's interacting with them. He's developing relationships with them. He's teaching them stuff. Okay, and as time goes forward, all of these individuals who have their own identities and everything, they learn a lot of stuff because it's coming directly from God. And while they're learning from God, God's also learning from them. Then that's when you start learning about emotions and stuff. Like, you got love, hate, and everything between love and hate. Sadness, joy, all kinds of everything in between. If you can think about the entire energy spectrum, all of these individuals have their own emotions, and they all feel different things, and God is trying to teach them how to stay in this higher vibration compared to, evil stuff that exists. God is aware of this evil stuff, and he's trying to prevent them from, it's one thing learning about it, but once you're exposed to it, if you start, experimenting with things that you really shouldn't, well, then you start going down these paths that, God knows what would happen if you did this stuff. But your curiosity is getting the better of you, so you decide to you do something bad, and you feel you have some type of gratification from it, whatever that might be, and then you try something more bold, and you get more gratification, and it just perpetually gets worse and worse. Okay, but back then, a long time ago, everything was perfect, right? And so you got all of these individuals who are out there, and they're learning and stuff, and then as the universe gets bigger, say the playing field gets bigger, right? Say the playing field gets bigger, the reality gets bigger, their boundaries expand, and then therefore you got more entities, more spirits coming into the equation, right? Coming into the equation. Okay, so you got people that are, you consider them new. They're newer to the experience, and these people who were originally created, they've been around for a while. So you'd say you got old souls versus new souls. But again, this isn't a different reality. This is a different place, okay? So once you start having people who know stuff, because the old souls know stuff, they're really experienced with things, or they're getting there, the masters or the guides or the teachers and all that stuff. They're considered somebody that the new souls would look up to learn their lessons and, mature as a spirit, whatever you want to call them back then. So as this world and everything just gradually gets bigger, the playing field gets bigger, and God is creating more and more spirits, or whatever you want to call them. Everybody has their own identities and their free will to become their highest version of their self, or they can go slow at it. It just depends on the individual. Okay? So as everything's growing, all of that, after a period of time, becomes a lot of work for God alone to micromanage and macromanage the entire thing. Sure, he could do it. Of course he could do it. But it's time consuming, and at some point, say if you were God, at some point, you would want to be allowed to kind of step back and enjoy your creation, rather than constantly be in a state of micromanaging and looking after every single person at all times. You could do it, but it would just be very exhausting and time consuming, especially when at some point you want to kind of step back and relax and enjoy your creation and just watch things build and evolve and move forward under its own free will, if you want to call it that, where God can just sit back and allow things to happen. Okay, so if that's the kind of foundation of how it's all starting, You know, the growth as far as the number of new souls and old souls is perpetually growing and growing. And as this is happening, God is interacting with all of these individuals, right? He's interacting with all of these individuals, new souls and old souls in different ways. And he's building friendships and relationships with all of them. And because God created all of them, you consider him as the Father, Heavenly Father, the original, right? So if he created everything, and then, okay, he also created reproduction, you know, the entire reproduction process. So if at some point reproduction is brought into this, where rather than God, you know, directly creating every living thing, those who he has created, perhaps they can now reproduce, and so their children, you know, they're the offspring of the original creation, and then they're an offshoot. Yeah, so it would be okay if say you were the original creation of God, and then you have children. You would call God like your grandfather, right, or father, but you still have the word father. So some people, I've met people who don't say like Heavenly Father. I've also met people who just call him grandfather. You know, Native Americans, I've met Native Americans that say grandfather. Not all. Some use a different name, and that's totally fine. It's okay. But if you know what you're speaking to, God goes by many names, and it's as long as you know who you're speaking to, it's all good, right? So God's interacting with all these individuals. He's building relationships with some. Those who choose to try and elevate as high as they can, and they're learning things that other people or other spirits are not necessarily interested in. So all of a sudden you have a hierarchy, right? So I'm just gonna make this hierarchy. It's just gonna be a bar. You got high rank, and then low rank, and then everything in between, right? Everything in between. So, you know, everybody has their responsibilities. Duties. Duties, jobs. You know, responsibilities, duties, jobs. And it's kind of like a ladder, right? So, you know, say you're a new soul, you're new to this, and so you're in the process of learning, so you can apply the same knowledge and concepts like you do here in real life. Say you're a new soul, so technically you're like a child. And so as a child, you first go to elementary school, then intermediate school, then high school, and then college if that's your calling, and then you can go into higher layers of mastering whatever field of study or whatever interest you have. You can learn how to master that. Same concept, but a different reality, somewhere different, okay? Not here on Earth, okay? So, whatever, you know, you're a new soul, and at some point you're getting older, and you find an interest, okay? So you find an interest, and you want to apply to that, or get a job, or a profession, or a career in some type of interest. So, well, when you first get into it, just like here in this real world, when you get hired at a job or a specific profession, you're considered the new guy, a rookie, compared to people who have been there for a long time, who would be considered like a manager, or an assistant manager, or an assistant warehouse manager, or an assistant, you know, or just the president, or the general manager. You know what I'm talking about. It's almost like a ladder. You think about corporate ladders. It's kind of the same but different, you know. But all the same, you got people, the old souls who have been around, they've been working a lot, they've learned a lot of stuff, and therefore they have earned their positions in different ways. And some of these high-ranking individuals, well, a lot of them are having a lot of one-on-one time with God himself. You know, there's meetings. God has advisors people who God speaks to, and they offer their perspectives and stuff. And, you know, just God likes to see what, you know, he created these individuals, and sometimes he likes to sit back and see what they can think up. You know, allow some of these individuals to take the reign and see what they can think up, and maybe maybe God will implement or allow these ideas to be implemented in a natural way into this reality. So as this is all happening, God has these people who are in high ranking areas and intermediate ranking areas, and he's building closer relationships with them compared to those who are considered new souls, or people who are not necessarily trying to, they're not actually trying to participate in the management of the thing. They're just in a process of exploring and experiencing what this life has to offer at that period of time. There's a whole lot of magical, cool stuff out there, stuff that this world doesn't even have. And for those who are new, they're wanting to be out there for a while, experiencing all this stuff before they really start dialing into any specific thing where they want to become a master or a professional at something, right? So all of these doors are open for all of these individuals to explore this infinite universe that God has created, okay? It's a pretty cool fucking reality. Sorry for my language, but back then, when it was all originally created and everything was considered perfect, it was a pretty cool place. Pretty awesome, okay? So, but there's going to be, at some point, as I'm speaking, all of this is going to twist. But right now, I'm just starting with the foundation. This is a general beginning of where it all started, okay? I'm not going into specifics, because if I start going into sorry, there's a vehicle. If I start going into specifics, well, that's just going to be a sense of me projecting. And right now, I'm just sharing with you what I have had shared with me. And at some point, I will explain how I attained all of this information. But I'll do that later. But right now, I'm painting a picture for you. Okay? So this is what we're starting with. I'm going to pause the camera in a moment, and I'm going to wipe this clean. And so now that you have stared at this and heard me speak, just keep this memory in your mind. If you want to pause the video and then do a screenshot on your computer, so you have this image and you can just have that in the background, and then whenever you want to refer to it, and then as I go and I create new images, you can stack up all of your screenshots. And then once the video is over, you can have all those screenshots, and then if you've been listening, you can at least remember the things I've said, and you can just have the pictures as screenshots to look at. And then whoever you are, if you're really good at video editing or doing digital art and stuff, well, you can take all of this and make it into something fancy, as opposed to an idea off the dry erase board. And if you do this, you better give me credit for it. You better not just take all of this for yourself and then claim it was your idea, because remember, God's watching. This is me, everything I'm about to share. It's not me sharing it with you for you to turn around and take it all and to make money off of it and not even acknowledge me, Brandon. You don't even acknowledge me, Riders of Apocalypse War, nothing. And you start creating stuff and using this, everything I give you, you use the information and my crude. Yeah, so just keep in mind, Heavenly Father's watching, and all the guardian angels, and all the archangels and other angels that are out there. Anybody who takes all my ideas and you turn it into this thing where you're making money off of it and you're not even acknowledging me, well, that's where bad karma comes into the equation, because I'm sharing this to help you guys. And I'm also aware that some people are sickos, and they will take everything I share and turn around and try and make money off of it, and they won't even acknowledge where they got the information to begin with. You guys, it's been going on for thousands of years. It's not something new. It's something that's been going on, and I'm already aware of it. Okay, so I clean the board, right? Clean the board. So we're going to keep God into the equation, keep God up here. Okay? And then, okay, so you guys are aware of the ranking system, right? So I'm going to draw a whole bunch of stick figures, okay? Stick figures, and each one is going to be symbolic of something, okay? Each one. And the names are just, labels that you guys can identify with. So you got instructors, you know, slash teachers. Teachers, you know, that can be these. Okay, you got a mentors. Okay, and you got guides. You got guides, right? So these individuals, I mean, I could keep going, but you get the idea. You got these people where at some point in after their creation, they decided that they wanted to be a guide to help the new souls in different ways, or they wanted to be a mentor and be like a one-on-one, like where you're spending one-on-one time with somebody, helping them, and it could be every aspect of life. Somebody that has a lot of wisdom and knowledge, and they are there to teach. I mean, you know, teach in different ways. And then you actually just have outright instructors and teachers where you might have multiple students attending a classroom where you're teaching a large group of people as opposed to one-on-one time, right? And so the instructors and teachers, it's kind of like a classroom setting where it's like everything's on a schedule. You have a constant schedule and routine with students who are coming and going. And then also you have mentors that are usually with you outside of the classroom who are helping you with real life. You know, you're out living your life and you're experiencing real life situations and experiences, and you have a mentor with you to help guide you with making the best decisions that you can, right? You know, and then also letting you know about different alternatives that would be considered bad decisions, and letting you know what might happen if you decided to do these bad things, as opposed to sometimes making the hard decisions. You know, so the mentor is there to try and help you learn and discern the difference between good decisions and bad decisions and stuff, you know, just to help your own progression as your spirit. So your goal is to constantly be learning, elevating, maturing, so you can reach these higher layers that God has created for everybody. You know, those who have reached these layers, well, they have access to different realities and dimensions that God has created, and has, essentially, metaphorically, doors or portals that are locked and blocked off for anybody who has not passed their tests, or they're just not ready for what's on the other side. Well, you have some individuals who have walked through those things, and they have passed their tests and things, and they've learned what they needed to learn, and then they've come back to this other, this main reality that everybody's in, to help anybody, to get people prepared for when they want to take these next steps, if that makes sense, right? So these are all a bunch of helpers, okay? At some point, they all have different names. You got your instructors, there could be dozens of them. There could be hundreds of them, right? And they all have their own names, their own identities, and they're all unique to themselves. Same with their mentors. They all have their unique identities and attributes that no other individual has. Yeah, there are a lot of people who have a lot of similarities, but at their core, each individual is unique to the next. Same with the guides. Everybody has gone down their own paths and have had their own experiences, making them unique compared to somebody who has walked a different path, right? Just like here in real life, okay? So and again, you got all different professions that could just keep going and going, but I'm not going to waste the time. You guys get the idea, I hope. Okay? So as this is all going, these are, we'll just circle this, and we'll say old souls. And then I'll just draw some stick figures over here that says new souls. Just do 3 of them. New souls, okay? So these are like students. Like students, okay? So these guys are constantly interacting. These guys are constantly interacting. Pretty straightforward, right? So God, as the universe is getting big, it's one giant universe, there's a whole lot of stuff going on, a lot of really cool stuff. God's watching all of it, okay? God's watching all of it, and he's interacting with individuals. He's kind of strolling around his creation, randomly crossing paths with everybody. They might not know it's God, but at some point, God reveals himself, and all of a sudden people, oh wow, there you are, because he can change his appearance as he wants to, okay? So God has his people. Talking about the high rank. We're going to say, just draw the high rank, high rank, high rank, low rank. Okay, I'm just doing that so just so you can remember from the last picture. So God eventually starts. At some point he has. God's the number one position. Number one. And then you got your number two position, your number three position. You got your number 4, 5, 6, 7. 4, 5, 6, 7. And it can go on and on, okay? And you can look at it, okay, well, is it a pyramid scheme? No, it's not. Yes, it does look like a pyramid, but if you scratch your head and you think about the Illuminati pyramid and the pyramid that everybody knows in today's world, and everybody associates that as evil, well, yes, that pyramid, all of that is evil. That's it's all, everything's been hijacked. And again, I will explain all this. But originally, it was not corrupt, it was not evil, and it was originally designed and constructed to operate, and it's all about efficiency, because as the universe and everything gets bigger, God can only do so much. He can handle a lot. You could say he can handle everything. And maybe he can, but at some point that's not cool. That's not fun to just put it all on his shoulders. Where God created everything so he could enjoy his creation. However big the universe gets, he can go anywhere at his leisure and interact with the environment as he wants to. It just either to be as an observer or a participant, however he wants. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how you feel about it. God can do what he wants. Okay. So, where I'm going with this is, all of these, each of these, they all have their own individuals. Everybody's their own individual, their own identity, right? And so after a period of time, specific individuals earned God's trust and demonstrated them somebody as God could confide his thoughts and, things that he's pondering, whether good or bad, things that are bothering him, anything. Just have conversations with these people who are close to him, people who he would consider as immediate family. He speaks to these people as if you would speak to your husband or wife, or your son or daughter, or your brother or your sister, speaking to these individuals and treating them as such. And at the same time, all of these individuals have a lot of responsibilities in the context of how, managing this giant reality, okay? It's pretty easy to understand, I hope, right? So, each of these individuals have their own names, okay? And God has, God's the number one, but number two is like his left hand and his right hand. Number 4 and 5 and 6, well, after God tells the number 2 and number 3 what he wants done in the reality, well, God can't go talk to everybody. Well, the number 2 person, they start having meetings and, meetings or whatever you want to call it, conversations with the 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, all the way up to whatever. And they start delegating and giving everybody their assignments to see out these grand projects that God would like to see if his creations, he could create it in the blink of an eye if he wanted to, but he's trying to teach all of his creations how to do things, and he's telling them what he wants, and he wants to see if they can do it, and if they can follow the instructions. Well, that's some pretty big achievements for all of God's creations, for them to be able to create these things that God had thought up in his brain. It could become something pretty cool. You could make some pretty amazing stuff if you have everybody working together and everybody's You know, there's none of this evil or stuff that we have now in this world, where now in this reality everybody gets excited because they were like, whoa, that sounds really cool. Let's all work together and see it through, right? So you have your number 2 and number 3. They're considered old souls, and a lot of the, you know, these number 4 through 20, they're considered old souls, right? And so they're the ones that are out there they're really interacting. At some point, you know, the lower you go, the larger the group you're responsible for, as far as like students and rookies who are just coming into professions, apprentices, and stuff like that. So everybody who's at a lower rank, they're not necessarily getting access to God as far as one-on-one conversations as these higher ranking individuals. At some point, these higher ranking individuals start taking advantage of that, where things start getting miscommunicated, and then things start getting out of hand, where instructions are not being followed to the letter, and there's things that are getting tweaked and new variations being implemented, where by the time the final result, you know, the final product of whatever project is completed, it's not to God's specified directions, and then things, you know, got to start over, you know, because that's part of the learning process, and that includes those who are at the higher layers. But the problem is, if you're somebody who's close to God and you see all these people who aren't, that's where ego starts coming into the equation. That's where, you know, where you start having authority issues coming into the equation, because rather than listening to your superior, the person who is your leader or God, you want to go with different ideas, and you start being disobedient and start making your own tweaks and variations, well, you're starting to assume that you're above God, right? And once you start assuming you're above God, well, remember, everything is a test right now, and God really wants to know who he can trust and who he can't, especially when it comes to this type of stuff where God allows you or whoever to get close to him. Because once you start getting close to him, he's going to wonder if you truly are on his side, or if given the opportunity, you will try and elevate yourself past him, you know? And that's where anybody who's familiar with the Bible, this is where some of those stories you've learned about, it might start making sense a little bit. But remember, we're still at the very beginning, okay? At the very beginning. And so you can start seeing there might be some type of conflicts escalating here in the near future amongst all those who are right here, and you got God right here, okay? So, you know, there's a lot of people who are supporters of God, and then there's people who are just in the back of their minds, they're starting to question what they're being told, wanting to implement different ideas that God's telling them no, because God knows where it will lead to. He knows after enough time it will turn into something negative or something bad or something that will be destructive. And so he's trying to tell people no, but for whatever reason, these individuals want to do it anyway because they are curious and they want to see for themselves, or they're just too ignorant to care, or they just don't care. And that's where, if you guys have heard the expression, curiosity killed the cat, well, you know, that's kind of where it comes from. You know, if you really want to go all the way back, well, it's kind of the same concept. Okay, so I'm going to wipe the board again, so I'm going to start over, so nobody trip out. Oh yeah, you know, take your screenshot if you need to. You know, pause the video and then take a screenshot. Okay, there you go. 1, 2, 3, picture. So not that good. Okay. Take number 3. Here we keep going. Or I guess it should be number 4. Alright, so we're gonna put God back here, okay? God right here. Okay, so I'm just gonna say, you know, God created reproduction, right? God created reproduction. I'm just gonna put reproduction. Okay, reproduction right here. And you got man. Just make it man. And then we're gonna do, you know, woman with her long hair. You know, again, we're not We're not going to make things complicated. You know, she's got a dress, okay? Woman, man. I'm not saying human. I'm not talking about here in this reality. I'm just saying a masculine, feminine. Maybe I'll do that better. Here, we'll erase that. Feminine, masculine. Okay. So feminine and masculine energy, and you got the reproduction cycle or process, whatever. So at some point, you know, meaning you get little guys, you know, little offspring, right? You got little ones. So they're new souls, right? Children, new souls, right? Okay. So, you know, God created reproduction. Okay, he created reproduction, and then he created, you know, this entire place, this other, you know, realm, reality, or whatever. He creates it all. So it's a giant environment for everybody, you know, all the spirits that he creates, whether masculine energy or feminine energy. They all have their own identities, and they have a giant area, a dimension, a reality, whatever you want to call it, that they can all move around and interact amongst each other. And you know, if you just think about this reality, so similar to this reality, but way beyond anything you can conceptualize in your mind. It's like a magical universe, okay? But as a whole, you got reproduction. So God created, you know, if you think about Adam and Eve, okay, well, it's the same concept, but not in this world. Before, a long time ago, before, okay. So you have this divine and feminine energy, and they're creating children, and so essentially you create this. Here, we'll just circle it all. You know, the family unit. Okay. So it's you know, you got the entire family unit. You got the mother who has her job, her responsibilities, and then you have the masculine who has his job, his responsibilities, and then the children are pretty much wild. You know, they're wild, and they're just wild energy, and you have to teach them and educate them, and they have to figure things out for themselves eventually. As they get older, they eventually have to figure this stuff out for themselves. But their mother and their father are essentially their guardians and their teachers. But at the same time, you still have classes. You know, you have your instructors, real teachers. You have your mentors. You have your guides and all that stuff. It's all also out there. Okay. So, you know, we'll just say, I'm just going to draw a few more. You know, I'll just say instructor, guides, etc. You know, or comma. You know, it can be these other guys over here. So you got these guys interacting, and you got these guys interacting, right? So God's watching all of this. God's watching all of it. He's watching, you know, people. He's watching their creations, his original creation. He's watching them have families. He's watching them have children, okay? And so, you know, and then it keeps going. As time goes on, you got grandparents and great-grandparents who become ancestors and guides. You know, it's this perpetual thing where just everybody just keeps climbing higher and higher the longer you've been in this reality. You know, the longer you've been in it, when you're considered an old soul, well, you might be an old soul, but you're always still learning and elevating to these higher layers and stuff that God has created. The higher you rise, you're tapping into these things that God has reserved for only those who have matured. You know, their spirit has matured and they've passed certain tests Okay, well, cool. Good job for you. Now you get access to this next room. This next room's pretty cool. And now that you've matured enough, we know that you can handle it, or God knows that you can handle it, and you're not going to mess it up, right? So all of this still applies today, so take note. Everything still applies today. And at some point, you're going to figure out what layer you're currently at, and you're going to figure out what's above you, waiting for you, if you can figure out how to get there, okay? So, still, we're going to go way back in time. Not in this world, not in this reality, okay? So God's watching, people have families, and he's, the mother and father, they get super excited and happy because they have children now, and they get to raise their children, and then their children get older, and then their children start helping their parents, where it's just this big reciprocating energy where everybody's helping each other, okay? And then everything's just functioning awesome, right? At the time, everybody knew who God was, and everybody loved God. God had created this paradise, this perfect place, just, out of his own mind, out of his own creation, right? As far as face value, it looked like paradise. It's everything you could have ever wanted. But remember when I started talking about certain individuals who had become close to God, like his, you got the number 2, the number 3, number 4, 5, 6, 7 positions, and then all those layers beneath. Well, some of them were getting a little jealous or envious because everybody loved God and God was creating some cool stuff, but these individuals, they wanted to implement some of their ideas into this reality, and those ideas, God just kept saying no, because God had the foresight knowing what would happen if those ideas were implemented. And so it's constant rejection, constantly telling them no. He might have even gone as far as explaining why this can't happen, because this will happen. If you really want to do this, well, this is what's going to happen. I guarantee it, that's what's going to happen. So therefore, the answer is no. And he just sends them on their way with a big fat no. Some of those individuals take that personal and they get upset about it, okay? And so eventually they start going behind God's back, okay? So these are all variables and things to consider that were happening. So at some point, God, but on the positive note, God's watching all these happy families becoming a reality. And so at some point, God has all these people around him, and at some point God is kind of questioning whether or not they have some bad intent. He probably does know what they're going to do, but he just doesn't like it. He doesn't like it. So what does he do? At some point, this is where you've heard the story about God and his only begotten son. God create God's one and only, his most special creation, unique to his entire creation on the board. His creation, his very special thing, God wanted a son. Someone he could just call his son, and God would teach him everything there is to know. It takes time. It takes a long time to eventually learn everything. But God wanted to teach somebody who he would consider his son, where at some point, once his son passed all of the tests, God's going to put his son through a lot of tests and stuff. But once his son matures to a certain age, God wants to be able to retire to where he's no longer intervening on all of the really bad stuff that, any conflicts or things that get out of hand. Well, he wants somebody that he can wholeheartedly trust to take care of these things without him having to get in the middle of all of it, because it takes a toll. Realistically speaking, it takes a toll, especially if you're being called to focus on things that aren't necessarily positive, because those negative things still do exist in that reality, because that's part of the journey of learning and growing and elevating and learning your lessons and all that stuff, okay? But overall, in the grand scheme of everything, it was a perfect place. It's just a matter of people figuring it out, and that's all part of the process. But at some point, God decided he wanted it. He sees all these people having families, and he sees people having their own children, both male and female. These people are having their own sons and daughters. Well, God wants his own, so he creates, again, whatever the proper title is, doesn't matter, but I'm just using a name that everybody identifies with, and you know who it is. Okay, it starts with a J. Jesus, okay? That's keeping it simple, okay? It has nothing to do with using proper titles, because there's a lot of people who are listening who have never heard of these proper titles, and who knows if they're even the right title. It could have just been somebody telling you that's what it is, but it might not be. It doesn't matter, but everybody has heard of the name Jesus. And if you've read your Bible, you've heard of Heavenly Father, and you've heard of Heavenly Father and His only begotten Son, Jesus Christ, right? And so, when He originally created Jesus, Jesus was originally a new soul. New soul, new soul, right? He's new to the game. There's a lot of old souls. There's people that have been around for a while, and they've been through stuff that the new soul Jesus has not been through. He hasn't been through yet, so there's a lot for him to learn. So when Jesus was originally created, we'll I'm gonna draw God as an adult, bigger, and I'll draw Jesus as little, so you can differentiate the two. We'll say G, and J, right? God and Jesus, okay? So Son and Father, or Father. Sorry, I'm kind of holding the board at a weird angle. Father, Son, okay? Simple, right? So you got Father teaching his Son as much as he can possibly teach him. So as Jesus is getting older, time is completely different there. So it doesn't really matter. We're not talking about years. We're not talking about decades. Time is completely different there. I'm just talking about the idea of being a new, young soul. We're not talking about how long it takes to become an old soul. That's not the point, okay? It's not the point. Just that he's a new soul, which means there's a lot for him to learn and experience, a lot of tests and trials and lessons that he has to go through before he can ever become worthy to step in his own father's shoes, where, say, his father does give his son a crown, that Jesus, his son, is not going to just turn around and undermine the entire thing and fuck it up, So it's a thing where Jesus has to prove himself through a period of time, and during that time frame, he's going to be getting all kinds of lessons and tests and stuff, okay? His father, of course, if his father is God, God created Jesus very specially, well, you better expect God's going to have a very, very high standards for his son, and he's going to put him through things that are much more difficult where that other people would not be subjected to, because God, it's all about maturing and becoming wise and all this stuff before you can ever step into this bigger role. So that's a thing, okay? So as Jesus becomes, he's created and now he's in this reality. He exists now and everybody knows who Jesus is. Like if you think about the movie Lion King, the cartoon Lion King, was it Mufasa was Simba's father, Mufasa. If you think about the very beginning when Mufasa and his wife, they conceived Simba, so Simba is a newborn cub, right? And at the beginning, Mufasa and the baboon, I think he was a baboon, Rafiki, they walk out on that big rock and they hold up Simba, so the entire animal kingdom sees him, right? And they know who he is. And they know his significance. So if you think of, I'm just using the Lion King movie because it's something that you guys can all identify with if you've watched that movie as a child or you have your own children and you've had them watch it, right? So, everybody knows who Simba is, and you know who Mufasa is, which means if you're not Simba and you're not Mufasa, you better not hurt Simba, right? Because you got... Excuse me. Because, in the movie, Simba meant everything to Mufasa. Mufasa was the father lion, and the father lion, the entire safari, the African plain, was his dominion. Like he told Simba, as far as your eye can see, that belongs to you, but don't go into the shadows, right? Of course it happened, though. I mean, if you just follow the story, that movie and that story just tells you kind of how things may have played out a long time ago. But if you remember the characters in the movie, there was Scar, right? Scar was essentially Mufasa's brother, his brother. Mufasa, that was the lion who was the king of the entire, and king of everything, and Scar was considered his brother. And so Scar was also Simba's mentor for a period of time, where Scar, sometimes Mufasa would leave Simba under Scar's care, and Scar would teach things to Simba. And essentially, how, if you think about the movie and why, why Mufasa died and why Simba went into the shadows and all this stuff, well, a lot of it had to do with Scar whispering ideas and things into Simba's head, and then putting him up to these dangerous tasks, and telling him that he's not courageous if he won't go to these places or do these things. Just kind of taunting him. And Simba doesn't know any better, because his own father, Simba's pure. He doesn't think that way. He doesn't think like an evil person. So when somebody's telling him something, and his own father has told him to trust Scar, told him to trust his brother, well, Simba is trusting him. So Jesus, Jesus is trusting. Remember, you got your number 1 or your number 2 and number 3 positions. Okay, so a long time ago, before Jesus came into existence, you had an individual who I don't know what his official name or title is, but everybody has heard the story of Lucifer. And you've heard the story about how Lucifer used to be God's favorite. Right? A long time ago, he used to be God's favorite, which might imply that he might have been God's left or right hand, where he was somebody that God always went to when he needed some type of counseling or advising, or needing some input on something, or he needed another individual's opinion on what, God was wanting to do something, but he wasn't sure if he should or not. And he'd go talk to Lucifer, and Lucifer would give his opinions on something. And at some point, God might have started taking Lucifer's counseling. He might start doing some of the things that Lucifer was putting into his head, right? So Lucifer had earned and found himself in this very close position with God. But when Jesus came into the equation, what do you think happened? You think Lucifer got bumped down to the number 3, maybe? You got Jesus all of a sudden. All of a sudden, he's God's most favorite. It's his own son, man. God put all of his love. He put everything that God is, his creativity, his imagination, his love, his wrath, everything you can think of was put into Jesus and more. I mean, everything that God could conceptualize went into Jesus. But if you think, usually, if you think just generally, your offspring, at some point, some children's offspring end up being way more intelligent or brilliant than their own parents, where their own offspring can do things that not even their parents can do. And so God put everything he could into Jesus. But at the same time, what God was rewarded with was something beyond what he even thought. Something even more than what he could think of. And so, what do you think happened when Jesus became God's right hand, his number 2, and then Lucifer got bumped down to number 3, or maybe even number 4? I mean, there might be other, did Jesus just come into creation through just by him creating him with his mind, or is there another entity out here that's feminine, a feminine energy that God might have married or had fallen in love with, and God and this feminine energy, feminine wife, maybe I'll just say wife, God's wife, maybe I don't know. I have my suspicions, but yeah. So they conceptualize Jesus, right? And so all right. Sorry, I ran out of time, so I also had to change the battery on the camera. So it's only been a minute since the cut. So what I was saying is, you got God's wife, right? And the big question is God's wife, did God fall in love? Did God have somebody that he married and fell in love with, one of his creations, or however? But did God have a wife? Well, That's something, you know, that if she existed, God would probably keep her a secret, so you would not know how, meaning you might not know how Jesus came into existence, you know, how he was created, whether God just created him by using his magical gift of just instantly creating Jesus, or did he meet somebody and fall in love with that individual, and then they had a child, and between the love that those two shared amongst each other, Jesus was the product, you know, everything. It was all between God's wife and God. It was all one giant package deal and more, all into one baby. Okay, so that's kind of what you got. So if this becomes a thing, so you got God, his wife, and Jesus, and you got people that are starting to question God's authority and the direction they're going, and getting frustrated that their own ideas are not getting implemented the way, you know, they want things to happen, and God's not doing it because God has the foresight to know that bad things will happen if we do those things. So you got somebody like Lucifer who's envious of, you know, he's envious because God has the absolute power and has the absolute say so, and it doesn't really matter what Lucifer says on the matter, or whatever powers or gifts Lucifer has. God can override anything Lucifer does. It doesn't matter. It does not matter. So Lucifer could throw a tantrum as much as he wants, but God's more powerful than him because God is God, and Lucifer was created by God, and he only exists because God created him. But at the same time, Lucifer is his own identity. He thinks for himself, and he has his own free will to make his own choices one way or the other. And at some point, things just start getting worse and worse. Okay? So you guys hear my bottle pop? Oh, that's one thing worth mentioning. Throughout my videos, as far as when I recorded the game, part 1, 2, 3, and 4, if you may have noticed it, but you may not have, and by telling you this now, you might be inspired to go watch those videos just to listen. But there are times when I'm speaking, and when I'm hitting a perfect note, or meaning that when I'm telling you something that's like spot on, or like hitting the nail on the head with your hammer, just a moment ago, I have my water bottles, but sometimes my water bottles will just pop. Like, there'll just be a loud pop inside my van, or there'll be a loud creak or crack somewhere on the framing of my van, and it always happens when I'm in the middle of talking about something important, whatever. But that just happened. I just realized I did not attach my microphone again to my camera. But, so yeah, it's a little side thing. So just remember everything I said on this, okay? You got a whole bunch of families. You got your instructors and your guides. And you got your family unit. You got your children, okay? And then you got your number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 positions, all the way as far as you want to go. You go down to your position number 100. Doesn't really matter. But you understand the concept. God had his left hand and his right hand. His left hand and his right hand could have been his wife and his son. You know, his wife and his son Jesus. And then all of a sudden Lucifer gets bumped down to maybe even number 4. You know, I could just wipe him out of here. You know, Jesus is technically the heir. You know, if the whole point was for God to create a son, to create an heir, to inherit God's kingdom, to where eventually God could retire and go enjoy this creation with his wife, well, you know, God would probably be bumped to number 2 because he's the heir, and, you know, that's just kind of the hierarchy. But after that, it might have been God's wife who has the next say-so, right? And then all of a sudden you got this number 4, and number 4, who is Lucifer. Okay. So how do you think that made Lucifer feel? Do you think he might have started getting bitter and angry? Okay. Well, I'm going to pause the video again. I'm sorry. I didn't attach my microphone after I changed the battery. And I also got to wipe this down. So, you know, take your picture. Take your picture if you want. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and go. Oh. I gotta fix that real quick. Alrighty. Next slide. So, I'm again, the question is whether or not God had a wife, and if he fell in love, and that's how Jesus was conceptualized. Whatever the truth is, I'm going to keep his wife out of the picture, okay? Right now, we're going to just stay focused on God and his son, okay? So I'm going to write them over here. I'm going to write both their name, God, Jesus, okay? And then you're going to have, I'm going to put Lucifer over here, okay? So, he's bitter, jealous, and, frustrated, okay? Because this is love. This is all love over here. Love, respect, freedom. People, everybody who exists, they're free. Your freedom. Infinite possibilities. Okay? And so you're going to have this giant world down here, right? And you're going to have all these people, right? They're not people, they're spirits, whatever they are. They could be animals. Oh, there's loud noise. It could be animals. I don't know. It could be anything, man. It could be really could be anything. It's really noisy out there, outside my van. So you had all of this coming through here. So I just drew an arrow, so there's an arrow. All of this right here. Everybody loves, or the majority loves God. Everybody loves God, right? And because now that Jesus, because now that Jesus exists, everybody loves Jesus, right? Everybody loves Jesus. Through here. Sorry, those are terrible arrows. So God loves Jesus, and then between God and Jesus, you got infinite love, respect, freedom, and possibilities. So everybody down here, they just have this magical universe that's awesome. And now everybody's super excited because God has his own son, and his own son is pretty cool. Back then and everything, his own son was pretty cool individual. A lot of people liked spending time with his son because his son was humble. His son had been taught all kinds of lessons directly from God, and God was showing him how, he's like, you're my heir, and your position is unique, and you have to keep yourself in check, and you have to stay humble and all this stuff. And so as a product, as Jesus started getting older, everybody, most people, everybody down here, all the good individuals that were not thinking twisted thoughts, everybody loved Jesus because he was pretty cool. He was pretty easygoing to hang out with, and God had been giving him all different types of magic powers, so Jesus could do cool things, and he was blowing people's minds away, so everybody loved all of that. Well, as all of that's going on, Lucifer is kind of getting pushed into the back corner because originally, before Jesus came around, it was God, whether or not his wife existed, it was essentially God, and then Lucifer had made his way to the number 2 position. So for a period of time, Lucifer was having a lot of influence on what was taking place in this grand scheme of everything. But because Lucifer started presenting ideas that God was not on board with, and Lucifer kept being persistent with it and kept trying to do stuff behind God's back, well, that started making God question whether or not he could trust Lucifer. And so by default, after Jesus came into the equation, Lucifer kind of got bumped down and started not he wasn't like God was not trusting him as much. So Lucifer was just slowly getting pushed away, being excluded from certain things. But at the same time, Lucifer was also given the job, assignment, duty to be Jesus's mentor. So Jesus is going to his classes and visiting various instructors and visiting with guides and ancestors and stuff. So he's learning all these great things that he needs to be, but he's also being given time to spend, his father is telling him to spend time with Lucifer because Lucifer is very smart and he knows a lot of stuff. And so God gave Lucifer the assignment of being Jesus's mentor. So there are times when Jesus was not in his father's company and Jesus was just spending one-on-one time with Lucifer and nobody else. Okay, so when this is happening, Lucifer is putting all kinds of twist. He's telling Jesus the truth a lot of times. He's telling him how things are most of the time. But every once in a while, Lucifer would interject things that were true, things that were misleading, things that slowly, a little bit at a time, twisted Jesus' mind in different ways and twisted his perception. And so eventually Lucifer started putting Jesus up to different tasks and things that might not necessarily be approved by God, or at least Jesus wasn't telling God about it, and so Jesus was doing things behind God's back. But of course God knows, and of course he's watching Lucifer this entire time without Lucifer knowing this. And so God's keeping tabs on stuff. And at some point, if things started getting too out of control, God had every intention of intervening and taking care of it and, telling his son what was actually happening and what happened and get him back on the right path. But, God knows things that nobody else can see. And so sometimes God just kind of sits back and let things happen because he wants to see what people's true intentions are and if they are even willing to carry out their intentions, no matter how bad and no matter what type of consequences follow. Should these people perceive that they can get away with it without anybody noticing or getting caught. So God's always testing people, wanting to know what your true intent is. If you're on your own, alone, and you think nobody's watching and nobody's listening, well, what do you do and what do you think about and where does your mind go when you're completely alone? Are you thinking about sadistic, messed up stuff? Or are you thinking about good things, positive things, things that God would approve of? That's a big question that applies today as much as it applied back then. And most of these individuals, even though they knew who God was, and even though they knew God could do anything, some of them were either so arrogant to believe that God might not know everything, or he wouldn't find out, not knowing that God does know everything, or at least he has watchers who are watching everything, who can report information to him when he needs to know. Any combination of that, that's up for you guys to figure out and speculate on. I can't tell you everything. I don't know. I don't have all the answers, like I've said. So you guys just understand this. Back in this other reality, this giant reality where you have thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of spirits and souls who are living in this giant, vast creation, this vast universe that God created, where there's all types of magical, cool stuff, all kinds of amazing things, right? Things that would blow this reality out of the water. Okay, and then everybody knew God, everybody knew who Jesus was, and there was this mutual respect. Everybody knew those two, and they knew these people, and it was all about teaching people, helping people elevate, because the more everybody elevates, the more fun the reality gets for everybody. It's this perpetual cycle of awesomeness, okay? That's what it was originally designed to be, okay? But then you got this guy, Lucifer, who's becoming jealous because Lucifer, he's not God. He knows he's not God, and he knows that whatever he wants, God makes the final decision, so that rubs Lucifer wrong. And then at the same time, he is becoming very, very jealous of Jesus because Jesus is essentially everything that Lucifer isn't. Jesus is getting access to everything that Lucifer has been denied. So Jesus is getting all this attention because, he is the heir, and at some point he is going to take over this entire thing and start making all the major calls, where, you know, anytime Jesus has any type of things that he doesn't know, he can always go to Heavenly Father. He can always go to his Father if he needs counseling. But overall, Jesus will take over the reins, and then Heavenly Father, God, his Father, Jesus' Father, can, you know, kind of sit back and enjoy the creation as if he's just somebody else who's part of the creation, if that makes sense, okay? And so Lucifer is getting very jealous of all of this, and he's starting to think about how he can undermine the entire thing, how he can somehow get himself steal God's powers, or if he can possibly remove God from the entire equation. Is it possible? You know, he starts thinking about what he could do to undermine everything and just essentially be the number. He wants to move up to the number one position. If you're just to simplify it, he wants to be the number one position, and he wants to remove God from his position. That's what he wants, okay? So, you know, take your little picture. Take your picture, because I'm going to wipe this all down. Okay? There you go. I think I got it framed. You know, maybe I have it out of frame. Okay. There you go. 1, 2, 3, and done. Okay. So I'm going to pause. It would be so much easier having help. Alrighty, guys. I took like a 5-minute break. Okay, this is where things are going to start getting dark, and things are going to start twisting. And hopefully things might start making sense after a while, okay? I mean, I hope everything's made sense so far, but we still have quite a ways to go. Yeah, my microphone's good. So, with everything you've learned so far, it's just a matter if you can retain all this information, or if your cognitive dissonance is where meaning your inner voice is getting too loud for you to hear what I'm talking about or learn anything that I'm sharing. You know, it just depends on you. If you're able to just put yourself in a neutral point of view, as if this is something you're learning for the very first time and you don't have any belief system. I'm just trying to explain things from a neutral point of view, okay? So, with that said, it's a matter of if you can retain everything as we're going, step by step, slide by slide. If you need to watch this video more than once, totally fine. It's not a big deal. It's just a matter of if you're willing to invest your time and energy to get this stuff figured out, okay? You got to think for yourself, okay? So, here we go. We're going to put God and Jesus over here again. Okay, we're going to start over God and Jesus. Okay, so I'm trying to make it so you can see it. And then you got Lucifer. I'll just put Lucifer down here. Okay. So you're going to have Lucifer. I'm just going to circle him right now because he's kind of going to be the focus. And then these two, they could each be circled by themselves. I'll draw a line, you know, kind of like that. You know, they're both working together. They're in the same circle. Lucifer is in his own circle now, right? And so you got a whole bunch of entities, angels, archangels, you know, whatever you want to call them, ancestors, guardians, spirit guides, you know, whatever name you want to call them. They're not exclusively one or the other. There's a whole bunch of different kinds and variations of different types of entities that are out there, man. Some of them don't even look like humans. Some of them look more like animals than they do humans. Some of them don't look like either. Just so you know. So these represent all of that, you know. These down here represent whatever entities exist beyond this world in this other reality a long time ago. Whatever combination of all of that is, at a whole, whatever appearances they have, doesn't really matter. We're talking about their spirit. You know, Lucifer is his own spirit, and he has his own intelligence. He is unique to every other person. Or person. You know, person's just a general term. It's an easy term, right? But, you know, everybody's unique, and everybody makes their own decisions, right? So you have this giant reality that everybody lives in. Everybody lives in this giant reality, right? So just say this is the reality, and everything that everybody perceives as reality is within this boundary. Okay, however big and vast it is, doesn't matter. There's in their minds there is a boundary. Okay, at some point there is a barrier where things don't continue going forever. Okay, um, but hold on. Oh, there's somebody walking by. Heard footsteps. So just understand, like Lucifer, he's he's very angry, very jealous, and envious. Oops, envious. So Lucifer is very envious and jealous of God and Jesus, right? Jesus is God's son, and God is Jesus's father. So obviously Jesus is getting a lot of special treatment because, just think about if you're somebody who has a child, obviously your children get a lot of special treatment compared to all the other children out in the world that aren't your own children. They're meaning they're not your own children. You didn't raise them. You have no. They have no role. You've had no role in their upbringing, right? So, all these people down here. Yeah, at some point, the original ones had originally spent a lot of one-on-one time with God, but as everything grew and expanded, at some point, everything just became so big that a lot of people have never really had one-on-one time with God or ever, but they know who God is, they know He exists, and they love the reality that they live in, right? So everybody knows it's not like a mystery or anything back then. Everybody knows who these two are, and everybody loves the reality that they live in. Yes, there is some discontent, there is some discord and stuff happening within here, but a lot of that is just individuals going through their own personal shit. Everybody's going through their own lessons and tests and everything, and everybody's encountering their own obstacles and challenges, right? So it's not, everything's super awesome, but yeah, there are a lot of hard lessons and stuff to learn within this reality. So, but Lucifer has his own ideas about how he thinks things should be implemented or how things should change in this different direction. And God wasn't having that, and God is teaching Jesus that this is the reality that we need, and things are the way they are for a very specific reason. There are rules for a very specific reason. There are laws for specific reasons in order to stop these certain bad things from ever happening. And then, whatever God taught Jesus, He might have taught him a lot, okay? Jesus might have totally been aware of how everything is supposed to work, but at the same time, Jesus is still relatively a young soul compared to those who have been around for a long time, okay? But all the same, Jesus is growing and He's learning fast, and people are seeing Him for how brilliant He is. All his, He had cool ideas and stuff, and a lot of people were benefiting from Jesus' existence, and then it was also freeing up a lot of God's time in the context of things that may have been taking up a lot of God's time. Well, Jesus may have been implementing ideas into this reality that was making things easier, not only for God, but everybody else too. And, because of that, Jesus is getting a lot of thumbs up, a lot of praise, just as much as God is. Glory to both, right? And then Jesus is just in the back. He's just in the back. He's not thinking up anything brilliant. He rather than participating and trying to build the most awesome reality as they can, Lucifer, he's just going in the back of his mind and going into this dark place where he's becoming jealous and envious of everything, and jealous and envious that all these people are looking at God and Jesus as opposed to even acknowledging Lucifer's existence. So, Lucifer's getting fucking pissed off about it, and he wants the recognition back, and not only that, but he wants to take control of this whole thing, and all of his ideas are getting ignored, and then all of Jesus's ideas, not all of them, but some of Jesus's ideas are getting implemented, and the reality becomes even better, right? And so at this point, there's a tipping point where at some point Lucifer, whoever he can get to listen to him, you got entities over here, those who he can get to listen to him, he starts spitting venom in their ear, because he is very smart, and he's very good with words, and he knows how to twist people's minds just through influence. His influence by speaking can twist people's minds in a bad way, where after a period of time, these people are listening to all of his ideas. Because if you think about the New World Order agenda and stuff, and how all these elitists and all these people who have sold out, how if you've really dived into the New World Order and what their plan is and what their version of how they perceive the world should be, it's kind of like that, or if it's exactly that, right? So Lucifer is spitting all this venom, this stuff in people's minds, telling them, well, we could make, maybe if we try to undermine God, or undermine both God and Jesus, and maybe if we can find a way, we can somehow take this reality and remove both God and Jesus from the equation, and then we can build the reality that we want, and exactly how we want it. So he's telling these people that, at whatever point in time that Lucifer discovered that it's possible that he could get away with this and do this, well, I'll get into that shortly. But there was a point in time where Lucifer started formulating a plan inside his brain, and then he carried out that intent where he started recruiting people who would listen to him about this big plot, scheme, conspiracy about how they could remove God and Jesus from the equation. He had this big plan, how we could do it, we could get away with it. And so the more people listened, he was getting followers, people who were not only listening, but they're willing to carry out this act if they could find the opportunity to get away with it. Nobody would be willing to do it if they didn't perceive they could get away with it. So Lucifer, he had to gain people's influence, right? And then he had to get them on board, like you're building an army. So he had to build an army, people who were willing to make diversions, people who were willing to, do backroom recruiting, just try to build this army as big as they can. That way, whenever Lucifer could find the opportunity to try and undermine God and Jesus, he would take that opportunity, and then he would give all of them the signal, and then all of them would make their grand move in unison, right? So if you've read the Bible, some of this might sound a little familiar, maybe, but you can kind of see where this might be going wrong. So as all of this was taking place, over a period of time, we're not talking about how the time frames. That's not important. We're just talking about the story. So however long this took for Lucifer to gain enough influence over a portion of the total people, there's hundreds of thousands of or millions of spirits in this world. Who knows? I don't know that number, the total number, but he tried, over a period of time, he recruited. If you hear about the fallen angels, and you've heard the number 33%, or 1/3 of the angels were cast out of heaven. Okay, so we're just going to go with that. We'll say 33%. So in this other reality, you could say heaven, or this other dimension, this other place, when Lucifer made the decision to conspire against God and Jesus, this is kind of how it began. This is a different place. And so Lucifer is the one that started it all, and he's the one to blame for everything. More or less, he's the one to blame for everything. But when it first began, it all started with him spreading discord, lies, slander, rumors, gossip, and stuff, both about God and Jesus, and then putting out his own ideas about how he could create a better reality than God, create something way better. And then inside Lucifer's mind, his idea, if he could get away with this, he's thinking like, man, if I could do this, I could make everybody love me more than they love both God and Jesus combined. He's like, I would create the most cool thing. So, in his mind, that's what he's thinking. He wants to overthrow God, and not only overthrow God, but make a better reality where people would love him more than they love God and Jesus as they currently were at that time. So that's a thing that he was psychologically going through in his mind. Okay, and so that was part of the catalyst that caused him to start speaking to people, against, behind God's back, behind closed doors, closed meetings, everything's just out of God's sight as far as Lucifer perceived. He thought every time he brought this stuff up, he thought it was places that he perceived God could not hear him or see him. It would have no way of finding out about these meetings or discussions. But so he was doing all this stuff behind everybody's backs, but over a period of time he was gaining followers, people who pledged to him, and he had a pledge. You had to pledge to him, and then everybody that's pledged, well, you can't talk about it or anything. And then everybody was waiting for the opportunity where Lucifer would do the deed, and then that was like the signal where everybody else who has their own assignments and jobs to go after everybody else, because they're going to go after anybody that was really on God and Jesus' side, their bodyguards, their family, their friends, anybody that was close to them. Well, these 33% would go immediately after all of those individuals. That way you get all the witnesses, anybody who would become a problem. They went and, their jobs was to either go capture them and kidnap them or outright murder them and make them disappear. And then you're going to have this other crowd who's not even going to have any idea what's going on. Everything's just going to get really chaotic for a little bit, and then there's going to be a lot of fire and smoke and shit, and then once all the fire and smoke settles, all of a sudden God and Jesus is gone, and all these other individuals are gone, and then you're going to have Lucifer, everybody who conspired to do it, and then everybody who's left remaining, they're all pretty much going to have no idea what happened. And so they're going to tell a whole bunch of lies, and then all of these people are going to have no way to prove one way or the other. And so they're either going to believe it, and anybody who doesn't believe it, they either get murdered or kidnapped and disappeared. The only people who were allowed left to remain are those who just believed the lie or just got on board with the lie and joined Team Lucifer, okay? So you have more people, you have more coming over here, right? So you got I'm just adding a few more, so you got a few more, after a little bit of influence, they end up going over here, right? And then anybody that wanted to go away, like ran away this way, we'll say this group right here, they all run this way, and then they get wiped out, just do a big X. They meet the X, right? They just get wiped out, okay? So this was the plan, what Lucifer was planning. I'm not speaking right now as if it's going down. This was the plan. They're gonna go after him, and then they're gonna go after all of their friends and stuff. Friends and family or anything you got that's tied to God and Jesus, like their really close company and bodyguards and everything, whatever, just closeness, all the really close individuals. And so these guys over here are going to go after these guys right here, right? And Lucifer is going to go after God and Jesus over here. Okay, so this is his plan. This is what he wanted to do. Okay? Understand so far? So far. We're talking about the plan, and then I'm going to cut here in a moment, and I'm going to tell you about what happened as far as the general idea, the general concept of what happened and how everything has led to where we are today. And then eventually I'll talk about how you come into the picture, okay? Here we go. So there's that. Sorry, buddy. I dropped it on his cute little paw. Sorry, Malaki, your cute little paw. Oh my goodness. He got a lot of exercise earlier this morning, so he's kind of sleepy. Continuing forward. Alright, this is where things are going to start getting weird. About to get weird. Okay? So, at this point in time, I'm talking about, Lucifer. I'll put him over here. Lucifer and his followers. Okay, so we're going to do Lucifer right here, and he's got his followers over here, right? Let's do 33%. Okay, so we'll just say 33%. So Lucifer right here, circle him, and then you got his followers right here. Okay, makes sense. You got Lucifer and his followers, 33%, however many that is. It could be, when you're talking about thousands, tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands, I can't give you the answer, okay? But it's 33%, okay, as far as what the Bible tells you. If that's actually true, that we'll find out later, right? I don't know. I don't have the official answer as far as how many. I'm just going with what you've heard about, okay? And then you got God. We'll say God, and then we'll say, put Jesus. I'm not putting in, I'm making a, you'll see. Jesus. Oops. Dang it. There we go. Sorry. Jesus. And then you say God's followers. God's family and followers. Okay, so put this here. And you got here. And you got here, okay? So then you got this, and then you got this big crowd. They're in their own circle, okay? And then you got new souls. New souls who are pretty much, they're doing their own thing, right? New souls are doing their own thing. Old souls, you can just say I'll just put old souls out here too. Yeah. Alright, so here's the conspiracy, the plot, okay? The thing is, so I told you about what they're planning to do. They're going to go after God, and then they're going to go after Jesus. They're going to go here first. Here first. I'll put first. Then you go second. Third. Fourth. And then fifth. Okay? Just generally, there's going to be a lot more involved, but you can probably understand if you just look at all the players on the chessboard in this other reality and dimension, and if you were Lucifer and you were going to try to undermine God and take God's powers and, remove God, in what order would you do it? Well, first you'd probably try to go after him if you could get that opportunity. Then you'd go after his son. And then you'd go after his entire family, friends, followers, counsel, advisors, whatever, any of it, all of it. And then you'd go after old souls, people who have been around for a long time, who have, they've learned a lot and they're aware of God and all of his promises. They're aware of how he's all about love and creating an awesome reality. So they're aware of all the traditions and where it's all come from. Okay, so wherever they've been is not really irrelevant. It's kind of irrelevant. It's just, generally speaking, all the old souls who know the truth and the old stories and everything. They know how things have developed and evolved to become where this reality currently was at that stage in time. And then you got the new souls who are essentially brand new to this reality, and they don't really know much. They might know some, they might know a little, or they might know nothing. They might be brand new. Okay, so one of the big questions that you should really ask is, when this was all created in this other reality and everything was awesome, and then Jesus came into the equation, I'm not saying it never happened before, but maybe it did. Maybe this would be the very first instance. Have you ever wondered where the very first murder came from? If God had been facilitating everything up to a certain point, and everything was more or less considered perfect up to a certain point, with exception to, everybody's going through their trials, tests, and having challenges and obstacles. So yeah, there's all these little downs, ups and downs, but more or less, when was like the first major sin committed in the context of murder, where maybe once upon a time death never even existed? Maybe people a long time ago, nobody even knew what death was, because nobody God created everybody and nobody have ever died because they had no reason to, and then so because nobody had thought about it and because nobody had ever died, as far as anybody was aware of, nobody had ever died, nobody had ever nobody had ever been murdered, nobody had ever witnessed anybody being murdered because nobody even knew what murder was. Everybody just perceived they're always alive. Everybody's always been alive. Nobody's ever died. That was just like as common knowledge as it is to breathe, inhaling and exhaling. You're like, what's death, right? So where did death come from? Well, maybe Lucifer is the one that thought that up, where he's wondering what would happen. Maybe Lucifer was wondering what is death. Well, if Lucifer wants to move himself into the number one position, well, how can you do that? Well, maybe God had found out what Lucifer was up to, had been catching on to what was going on behind God's back, and had been hearing all these rumors and stories about Lucifer talking about removing God, and then him and his followers, they would take over. Hold on, there's a vehicle. Like him and his followers would take over the reality and make the reality as they choose. But Lucifer wasn't really sure about it, and he didn't know how to do it. But God was aware of what Lucifer intended. So maybe God created the opportunity for Lucifer by introducing something to him. Maybe Lucifer had been wondering how God had attained all of his powers. Like, God, how did you get all your powers? Where did you come from? Like, if you're really God and all this and you're almighty, how did you attain all your powers? Well, maybe God knows. Maybe these are things that he just has never revealed to anybody because, it's something that it's nobody's business. I don't know. He would have his own reasons for not sharing this. But considering Lucifer may have asked them this question, well, that might have sparked God's, his suspicion. Like, why would you ask me this? What could you possibly want by having that type of answer? What are you trying to attain by having this answer? But Lucifer, maybe he had asked that question, like, God, how did you get your powers or something? And God may have he may have picked up immediately on what Lucifer was implying, like, are you mortal? That's what Lucifer was implying. Like, is it something that you just have naturally, or is it something that, you have some type of magic item that is making you have all these powers or something? Lucifer's probably trying to fish out information, looking for God's vulnerabilities, where if Lucifer could find the opportunity, he could actually remove God from the equation, and he was just fishing, by asking nonchalantly or innocently. He was just asking God, like, how'd you get your powers? And then so God probably knew what his intentions were. So what do you think? What would you do? How would you, if you knew what your enemy, somebody that is apparently not your friend, and you could really suspect what he's trying to do, what would you do? Well, what I've had shared with me, as far as through psychedelics and energy, I've had this shared with me where God created, he just created some object, some item that you could probably hold in your hand, and he told Lucifer this. He's like this. I'm just gonna say it's this. I'm just gonna use this marker as an example. He's like, this marker right here. When I hold it, it like a magic wand. When I hold it, I can do anything. I can do anything. Like, whatever I want, I can do it just by pointing my marker and thinking the thoughts. And so he told Lucifer, like, this is the item that would give it to me. This is what would give it to me. And just, say it was something small, something you could fit in your pocket, or like a ring or a necklace or something. And so that's what he showed Lucifer. And then he told Lucifer, he might have even played a trick on Lucifer, and like, where if, say it was a ring, and he took the ring off, and then like all of a sudden, God can't, like God's pretending that he doesn't have any magic powers, right? Without the ring, he can't do anything, but he's just fucking with Lucifer. He's just messing with Lucifer's head. But Lucifer, all he's doing is staring at that ring like, no way. It's all that power's in that ring? No way. I got to get my hands on that. So, what do you think? How do you think Lucifer could have got that ring? How do you think he could get his hands on it? Well, let's see. Well, we're just waiting for an opportunity when it's just God and Lucifer. hanging out together. Hanging out, right? You know, you got God right here and Lucifer hanging out, right? You see that all the way down at the bottom? You got God and Lucifer. They're hanging out like a one-on-one time, right? One-on-one, hanging out away from everybody. Nobody else is around, okay? And so at some point, you know, Lucifer had found out about, you know, I'm just saying a ring. I'm not saying it was a ring. It could have been anything, but I'm just saying maybe it was a ring. And so Lucifer found out about this ring. So after he had found out about it, he probably went back to his followers and he's like, you guys, I know exactly what I can do so we can take over this thing. All I gotta do is get this ring, and then if God doesn't have his ring, he doesn't have any powers, and if I take this ring, I'm gonna have the powers, so therefore God will become irrelevant, right? You know, so that's what he's thinking, and he's like, oh, we can do it. So however the event happened, I'm not sure. I don't know how it all went down, but I was shown something, and it was, you know, I'm generally explaining what happened, but when we're talking about the real details of all, I don't have that answer. So just bear with me. So just imagine God and Lucifer hanging out together, having a one-on-one private conversation with no witnesses around. They're in a private place. Maybe God and Lucifer had a conversation about something. I don't know, they might have just been bullshitting or something, you know, they're just bullshitting. God is aware of what Lucifer is plotting, but Lucifer is not aware that God is aware. Okay? Lucifer has no idea that God is aware of all of this stuff being plotted. Like, God is essentially playing stupid, and he's just acting naive, just waiting to see if Lucifer would actually fucking do it. You just want to see if he would actually do it. So while they're hanging out together, you know, God's just acting like he's not acting like he's on guard. He's not acting like he's suspicious. He's not acting paranoid. He's just going about his day, you know, like he usually does. Well, at some point, you know, as God's going about his day, talking with Lucifer, you know, they might have been hanging out at God's house, his house or something, you know, some private place, no family around, and they're just having a conversation. Well, at some point, you know, during the entire interaction, you know, Lucifer is just staring at that ring, eyeing it the entire time, just waiting for an opportunity for God to take off his ring. Maybe he had already identified when God usually takes off his ring, which, you know, it might have been just to wash his hands during dinner time, or, you know, it could just taken it off, you know, if they're playing a game or something. I don't know. But at some point, Lucifer waited for the moment when God took off his ring, and the moment God took off his ring, Lucifer has either snatched the ring, put it on, and then he used a weapon, some type of weapon, and he stabbed God in the back. Literally stabbed God in the back. Okay, so he stabs God in the back, and then God dies. He's the first one who has ever died on this entire thing. Nobody even knew. Maybe God had put that idea in Lucifer. Maybe Lucifer had asked what happens when you die, or what is death or something. Just ask some curious question about what happens if, like, a spirit no longer wants to be alive or something. And God might have told them that there's a place where you can go, like a purgatory or some place of isolation where you can go for a period of time, where you feel like you don't exist, but at some point you can decide to come back. He might have, you know, God might have told Lucifer about this other place you could go, or whatever. But, you know, he might have not have told Lucifer everything, and Lucifer thought, well, maybe if I can kill Lucifer might not have even known what he was doing or what would actually happen. But for some reason, you know, he waited for God to take off this ring. So as soon as he took off this ring, if it was a ring, Lucifer perceived God was no longer invincible, and that he was now mortal or something. So he was now vulnerable. So as soon, you know, Lucifer may have just grabbed the ring, put it on, where he perceived all these powers. The ring might have even had powers, it might have had powers that Lucifer didn't currently have. And as soon as he put it on, it made him feel like, oh wow, now I'm like God. I can do these things that I haven't been able to do. So he just thought all of a sudden he was God. And all of a sudden, you know, whether this was before he stabbed him or after, it doesn't really matter. But all the same, I have seen it through a vision on psychedelics. I have seen my Father, the Heavenly Father. He's my Father. I have seen him get stabbed in the back, and I was shown who I was told who it was. It was, I'm just using the name Lucifer, right? That's a name a lot of people can identify with. So it was Lucifer who did it, and he got this ring, right? So he got this ring, and then God, through Lucifer's eyes, God collapsed and fell on the ground, and he was no longer moving. He's no longer there, or he's no longer active. And as you would see it, it was like he was dead. And Lucifer's standing there with this ring, feeling like he's in God mode, looking down. He's like, I killed him. He's off the board, right? He's off the board. I got 3 minutes left. I gotta wipe this off. So remember, we're gonna keep going. But this takes, because I'm doing this alone, it takes, there's a lot of getting up and down, resetting the clock and all that. So it's all good. Alrighty. Alright, so I have a question for you. Imagine, say all of this is real, where originally it was just God, and then everything evolved into this giant complex multiverse reality where there's a whole bunch of spirits, whether it's in tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions. Have you ever wondered, say you ever think like, where I said at the beginning where, when it was originally God, where he had, when there was originally nothing except for God, where he became conscious of himself and became, he was able to create a place where he could materialize himself into, say, a physical being. And then he had the ability to interact with this reality he was creating. He could walk around or fly or teleport, whatever. He could do anything within this reality he wanted to create, okay? And then I told you all these other spirits and entities came into existence because he created them. And then eventually he kind of just allowed things to just progress in its own natural way, kind of by stepping back and not having as much direct influence and control over any given thing, where he was just allowing things to have their own free will to do what they want. They have their own intelligence, and if they can climb to these very high elevations and frequencies and vibrations and stuff, good for them. But not everybody's going to go that way. They're going to go in all different directions, and that's what God intended. He wanted to see what would happen. Okay, and then things evolved in such a manner, as I've previously described, where the universe became this super awesome place. Because all of the spirits and entities that he created, they were all intelligent. He gave them that intelligence. He didn't want them stupid, because that would be boring, right? He made them intelligent and gave them the free will to make their own choices. And after giving them all that stuff, he spent time with them, teaching them things, instructing them, and then all of a sudden you have this whole hierarchy of really smart individuals, those who are like scholars, and then everything below that as far as students and people in professions in different ways. Okay, so there's all kinds of stuff, right? But with all of that said, have you ever imagined, say all these things exist, right, and God's down there with it most of the time, but have you ever thought about where, if you're God and you have everything down here, but things just kind of, you want to have a place that you can go that is 100% private, where you have no interruptions. There's literally nobody. It's this a separate reality that you created, that you could go to whenever you want to, and when you're there, nobody could ever find you. They don't even know this place exists. They can't even. You have never told anybody about it. So therefore, nobody in this reality, this other reality that you created, that's vast. None of them have any idea that it even exists, including Lucifer. Whatever information God had told Lucifer, whatever Lucifer perceived, he might have been aware of these other places, like a purgatory, or just this isolated reality where you could theoretically go if you just wanted to get away from everything and kind of disconnect yourself from all that. God might have showed him all these places, and he might have told Lucifer that that's where you go if you theoretically die. You know, Lucifer might have thought up the idea of death, and he went to God and asked what death is. You know, like, what is it? Like, what happens for somebody that doesn't want to be here anymore? And God's like, well, you go to this type of place, and you can be there as long as you want until you decide that you want to return to this reality. And so Lucifer's thinking, well, if God, if you know, if God, if all this is real, and if he's not immortal, you know, where he's mortal if he doesn't have this ring, like, well, maybe Lucifer might have gotten too deep into the idea of, like, where did God come from? And then at some point just came to this idea that God is a mortal being and that there's even something bigger out there or whatever. I have no idea. I can't give you that answer. That's why I'm saying we're not going that deep. But I'm saying this might be where Lucifer tried going. Okay? And then at some point God told him this is where you go if you don't want to be here anymore and you die. You know, your energy goes down and you die or whatever. But he did not tell Lucifer about this other place that God can go, and it's exclusive for him and him alone, and nobody even knows it exists, not even Lucifer. So Lucifer has this perception, and God has created a barrier to make Lucifer blind to this other place that does exist. So here, this is where things get really fucking crazy, okay? So I'm just gonna draw God as a stick figure, just saying, you know, say he came in this lower reality. God came down and appeared just like everybody else. You know, he had his own identity, and everybody knew what he looked like, or maybe they didn't. I don't know, but Lucifer knew who God was, and he knew what he looked like, and they were spending time together. But so there's this. So they're in this reality here, right? They're in this lower reality as with everybody else. I'm not going to draw a bunch of stick figures. This is just, we're going to say Lucifer, we'll just say Lucy, right? And then God. Right, so he's got a knife. I'm just going to say, you know, he's got a knife. You know, it's a sharp knife. Okay, good knife, right? But anyway, he kills God, right? He perceives he kills God. He goes, bam, you're dead, God, right? But Lucifer does not really. Oh, I'll change. I won't do Lucy. I'll just do Lucifer. Lucifer has no idea what he's actually done. Lucifer, he thinks God is going to go to this other reality, right? He thinks God's going to go here, and when you're here, it's like a purgatory. I'll just say purgatory. Okay? And you stay in purgatory until you decide you want to come back to reality. And you're there however long you want to be there. You went there for a reason, and you're stuck there until you get your shit figured out, right? So it's purgatory. So Lucifer thinks he's going to send God to purgatory. And then anybody who goes to purgatory, okay, there's like a portal or something, like a giant portal, you know, like a giant portal, right? So the day you decide that you know, it could be a portal, it could be a gateway, it could be, I'm just, people know what portals are or have heard of a portal, so I'm just using that as a term, okay? So say there's a portal, so the day you decide you want to come back, you know, you go through the portal, and then you come back, you come back all the way around to this reality, right? And then you respawn, you know, like you respawn as you either, you know, you might even keep all your memories, or you just might have fresh memories, I don't know. But then you gotta do it all over again, so new soul, I'll just say new soul. Like a new soul. And then if you can have somebody with a knife waiting right here, you know, you have somebody with a knife waiting right here, and as soon as they come in, you whack them. Okay, you just kill them as soon as they come in. So therefore, they go all the way back to this purgatory, and they stay there as long as possible or whatever. But then they go back, and it's just this. You're stuck in this loop, right? That's what they want you to be, stuck in this loop. Okay, but what Lucifer didn't know, you know, he thought this is where he was sending God, right? He thought that's where he was sending, but God didn't tell him. There's another. This is kind of in the way. I'll erase it. I'll just get rid of that. you know. But God actually went this way, and he went to this reality up here, which was his, is essentially he's going back to his original isolation place. It's where he can go to be completely out of this, but yet he still has access to watching everything taking place, right? So he's still here. So you got God back up here, right? And so he's watching everything that's happening down here, right? So he just, as soon as Lucifer did his deed and then put on that little stupid ring, right? And then all of a sudden he thinks he's God. So now Lucifer thinks he's God. He's God, except with a lowercase g, right? Lowercase g. All of a sudden he thinks he's God because he just did this, right? So, but he doesn't know, as soon as he did the deed, God went all the way up here. God was actually expecting it. He was wondering, I said before, he was wondering if Lucifer would actually do it. Because, God knows he's going to go here, but Lucifer thinks he's going to go here, and he's just wondering, Lucifer, are you that stupid? Are you really that stupid? You're actually going to do this? Okay, I'm going to set the stage and allow it to happen. I'm going to give you the opportunity, everything you need to see if you will actually do it. Okay? So, the deed was done. Okay, the deed was done. So, I'm going to, we'll go over here. Let me just wipe this down real quick. I'm just using this is an old sock that has holes in it from hiking. So I'm just using it for this. I'll just throw it in the trash later. So, alright, so the deed is done, right? So now it's going to be nothing but chaos. But God is still alive. He's still aware. He's still in power. He's still aware, but he's in his own little safe space. Safe space. Very safe space. Here, say God. But the thing is, you got Lucifer over here. He thinks God is dead. So he thinks God's dead. He's got the ring. I'll just draw a ring. Ring of power. Power, okay? Makes you wonder where the movie Lord of the Rings came from, right? So Lucifer has this ring, and it probably does have powers, because God, it can't be something that does nothing, otherwise Lucifer wouldn't buy it. He'd just be like, this doesn't do shit, right? So it actually does stuff, and it gives Lucifer superpowers that other people don't have. And Lucifer perceives all of the power is in that ring. But he doesn't realize God did not put all of the power in that ring. God has powers that Lucifer doesn't even know God possesses. God can do things that Lucifer has never witnessed and therefore cannot conceptualize it in his brain. So he's blind in some aspect. He's blind, and that's why you see the picture with the one eye. Well, the one eye is symbol. Well, Lucifer's fucking blind. He thinks he's so smart and clever with what he's got going, but God has removed his vision about this other stuff that he just has no concept of. So therefore, he's blind. He's only got one eye. That's just a metaphor, a symbol kind of a thing. And if you can ever dive into that at a later time, you're welcome to it. But Lucifer thinks he's the fucking boss man now, right? And so he's got all of his followers who just saw him kill God. They just saw him kill God, right? I'm just drawing 5 followers. The number is not significant. I'm just randomly drawing 5. Okay, followers. Okay, so he's all of a sudden got this ring of power, and all of a sudden he can give them powers if he wants to. He can give them powers that I'll just say non-followers. Here we go. I got it. So he's separate. I'm just going to keep this up here, and that's probably going to stay. Okay? So this is going to be, let's say, family, friends. Like God's real family and friends, like those who are close to him. God's follow. Yeah, that's all I got to put. That's fine. Okay. So you got that crowd up here. And then you got your old souls. Wow, this pen. And I'm just going to draw two. Just two, it's fine. Don't need a bunch of them. And they're over here. So, oh, and then you got Jesus. You got Jesus, obviously, over here. Okay. So this is where things kind of get interesting, and this is where it kind of gets it makes you wonder if all of this is taking place, if we're still in this reality or if we're in a separate reality. It just kind of depends, but I believe we're in a separate reality. So, once Lucifer attained this power, the question is if God had warned Jesus about what was coming. He might not have warned Jesus at all. He might not have warned him, and whatever Jesus knew, that's all he knew. It didn't really matter. But the thing is, when Lucifer had been dealing with God, right? As soon as Lucifer, as not in his safe space, but I'm saying before he had attained the ring, when Lucifer and God had been spending time together, Jesus was spending time with someone else. The big question mark is who? Big question mark is who? Another person. And so, when this happened, at some point Jesus would find out about this. And so there's somebody that Jesus was spending time with where, as soon as Jesus found out, and then he start, his attention, whatever discussion they were in, somebody, say another person runs up, tells Jesus that his father has just died, and Jesus is like, what do you mean? What? And he tells him, like, your dad, he's dead, man. And then, so Jesus is like, what the hell? So it's all of a sudden, whatever conversation they were in, his attention is going to shift, like, okay, where is he? And so he's going to have his attention on these, they're going to be talking to each other. This person's going to be standing nearby listening. And Jesus, this is at the same time, he's going to be sneaking up behind. And it's while Jesus' back is turned, or the moment Jesus decides to start getting ready to go run and find his father, is when this guy, he either stabs him in the back, either stabbed Jesus in the back and tried murdering him just like him, or they stuck him in the neck with a sedative and put him, knocked him unconscious with something that, some type of witchcraft, dark magic stuff, something that just put him unconscious, one way or the other, right? But either way, whatever they did, so you got Lucifer, who all of a sudden has this power, and he can create, now that, God really put a lot of thought into this, so Lucifer believes he is God now, and he can literally create things on the fly, do things on the fly as if he was God, but he doesn't have the ultimate power, and he cannot see everything, even though he thinks he can. Jesus, on the other hand, when he gets murdered, it's not the first, you've heard about Jesus getting murdered. Well, you would think, well, God knows what happened. He sees it. And Lucifer, you remember you got this purgatory here. Purgatory. Right? So you got purgatory. So when they try murdering him, maybe they did murder him. I don't know exactly what happened, but I know Jesus got sent somewhere, which is probably here, where we're at now. And so he goes all the way, he gets murdered, say, and then he ends up in this purgatory. Heavenly Father, God, did not have Jesus go to the same place. As far as Jesus was aware, God got murdered and it no longer exists. He got murdered, and then so wherever he ended up, Lucifer assumes they're both in the same place. You got God and Jesus in purgatory. As far as the bad guys are concerned, they perceive both of them are in this purgatory with other people. There's a whole bunch of other people in this purgatory. Lucifer perceives both are there, and God is up here, right? He's up here, and because he still has ultimate power, he could literally create an avatar of himself where he could control himself, and it's kind of like an illusion. If you're there, you would perceive, if God has a unique identity and you saw him there, you'd perceive that was God. But it's just an avatar, something that God created and he could make it evaporate. If you know, if he doesn't want to be in the purgatory anymore, he can go back to a safe space, but he can essentially go into the purgatory if he wants to, and he can also go back into this if he wants to and just go incognito, just be in disguise, and Lucifer would have no idea that God's still alive. But all the while, Lucifer, right here, he thinks he's gotten away with everything because somehow he got Jesus dealt with, and now that Jesus is here, he can, you know, he can send his own agents into this purgatory if he wants to, and then whenever they want, they go through that little wormhole. You know, there's a wormhole. We'll just put the wormhole up here. So you go through the wormhole and you come out and you're back in this reality or whatever, right? So you're back, but they have somebody gatekeeping this. And if you're on their team, well, they'll allow you're back in that reality. But if you're not on their team, well, they'll just kill you and send you back into the purgatory, right? So, pretty complex.